What is up, Bills Mafia? It is a special Monday preview edition of the Buffalo Bills Shout Football Podcast. I am your host, Matt Perino. He is my co-host, Ryan Talbot. And after all the stops and starts over the course of the last week, it looks like we're going to finally have a football game here tomorrow, Ryan.
Yeah, it's bizarre because I think maybe you and I probably both and all the Bills Mafia, you're so used to waking up on Sunday and having a football game to look forward to. And if you're a Bills fan, it's generally those 1:00 games. So to not even have a game on Sunday in general it makes you a little impatient. It's not on tonight, but it looks like it's going to be on schedule for tomorrow. So, as the famous Tom Petty once said, the waiting is the hardest part. I would have sang that, but I don't want to lose our sponsor with my bad voice.
Listen, I'm not one to take away your gifts from the audience. So whether it be dad jokes or jingles, you feel free to belt it out whenever you want. This show is obviously brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets, your neighborhood store with more. And, tomorrow is going to be a good day to get over to Tops and pick up some stuff for the game because it's so weird, Ryan. We went into this season with all of these primetime games, and there was a lot of fear last week that, a primetime game was going to be taken away with the, Bills Chiefs on Thursday night, potentially being moved. It has been moved to now Monday night, which is kind of primetime-ish, but we have two night games here coming up in the next two.
Yeah, I'm not going to call it Monday night football. I'm going to call it like Monday dinner football, that 5 p.m. start for that game against the Chiefs. But, that's pretty nice. Imagine you're coming home from work. You get to watch kickoff almost immediately. It sounds like a nice little schedule. And like you said, we're picking up a Tuesday night game, which is now a nationally televised game as well. So in terms of prime time, the Bills actually picked one up along the way here.
Yeah. So we're going to, break these preview shows up into a couple segments, and we're going to start with, some storylines to watch, some things going into the game. We'll talk about some matchups, and then we'll end on our player to watch and our prediction for the game. So stay tuned for that. If you have any questions, if there's anything specific you want us to touch on throughout the show, feel free to drop them in the comments. Ryan's really, he's got the eagle eye for that usually, and we'll both try to take a look and figure that out. But let's start, Ryan, before we get into the storylines here. I mean, there's really just one storyline going into this game, and it is COVID-19 and its impact on not only the Tennessee Titans and all the positive tests that have come out of Tennessee, but the impact on the Bills and this game. And, I noted it in our outline here that, the Bills last week, it was reported by Jay Glazer of Fox yesterday that they were preparing for the Titans or the Chiefs. However this thing played out, they were getting ready for two different games. And we got to the point yesterday where I think everybody was like, okay, I think this Titans game is going to probably happen. But even still, after days and days and days and, over the course of 2 weeks of kind of back and forth, I still think even up until this morning's all negative test out of Tennessee, this was still a big question mark.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. It was just one of those things where, okay, is the next shoe going to drop, and then what's going to happen? Now, I know there's still one more day of testing. The players get tested today. The results come out tomorrow. But I think even if there is, I could still see the Bills and the Titans playing this game. And it puts a lot of, the fans in limbo, puts the players in limbo. And even on a much smaller scale, fantasy football players in limbo in terms of what to do. So it looks like, though, that this game is going to get played, which is good news. It was a staff member yesterday that tested positive. So the NFL allowed the Titans to go ahead with their practice, their preparation. So they're not going into this without any practices. But going back to the Bills, that's just very Sean McDermott, making sure this team is prepared for whatever was going to happen next, whether it was the Titans tomorrow night or whether it was just kind of looking ahead to that Chiefs game if this game ended up getting canceled. So not surprised that Sean McDermott went above and beyond to make sure this team was prepared for whatever the outcome was. Now, how will that impact this on-field play is my big question, because you're preparing for two different teams. So there's a lot that goes into that. So hopefully the Bills now can shift their focus entirely to the Titans here in these last 24, 48 hours leading up to this game. And make sure that they're ready to go and ready for everything they need to see on Tuesday night.
For a little timeline, I mean, if you go back 2 weeks now, in week 3, the Titans played the Minnesota Vikings. And I know some fans that might be tuning in right now, may want to get caught up on how we've even arrived here. Maybe not haven't seen all of the, ebbs and flows in this whole drama, this saga that's unfolded over 2 weeks. They played the Minnesota Vikings. Then all of a sudden, the positive tests started to roll in day after day after day. The Minnesota Vikings to this day still haven't had a positive test, which is the kind of the most unbelievable part of this story, in that they played a game against the Tennessee Titans, who have had, I believe with yesterday's case, it's 24 positives, over the last 2 weeks, an outbreak within the franchise. And so you go throughout the week. Last week's game is, against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That game gets postponed. And then you get into this week, and it was all the way up until Tuesday when they finally had all negative tests come back, within the Tennessee Titans organization. And then Wednesday was back to more positives, Thursday, more positives. And it was then Friday when I think, there was that day where everything came back negative once again, but everybody was kind of waiting with bated breath here. Like, okay, is this going to really work out here? Is everything going to be okay? Saturday, all negative. Sunday, the one staff member came back, and it's just been such an up and down. And I feel like, if I'm looking at this from the player's perspective, like you mentioned, Sean does a great job of, keeping them on track and keeping everything about, like, doing your 111 and staying focused on the game at hand that week. Well, it's hard to do that with all of these, like, will they, won't they scenarios over the course of the week, and all these different reports. We were talking about it yesterday. We posted how many different stories on how many different potential outcomes. And now we're finally here. The game is here. And I think you can put a lot of that in the rear view, but it's been quite a hectic week.
Yeah. And, the big thing is, you mentioned it. I think the fact that the Vikings did not have any positive tests played a big role in this game being played this week. Now, obviously, the Titans already burning their bye week factored into it, but the NFL has reportedly looked at a possible week 18 if other games have to get pushed, rearranged, moved around. But I think the fact that the Vikings playing in that game and not having any positive tests come back at all played a big role in the NFL saying, well, listen, they were on the field with this team for an entire game. Nothing happened there. You saw that the Chiefs, they had the practice squad quarterback, Jordan Teamu, but they handled it extremely well, and they've been able to play since. And they had gone against the Patriots, who were dealing with a little bit of COVID positive testing as well. So the fact that the opposition of these teams has come off relatively health-wise, very clean. I think that's played a big role in why this game will be played on Tuesday. But it's still something that I think is in the back of a lot of Bills fans' minds in terms of, well, what happens after, when Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the Bills get tested? Are we going to see anything come back there? Because if that is the case, if something like that does happen, well, that's a nightmare scenario for the NFL, because they had many opportunities to say, hey, let's shut this down and move it around. But they did not do that. So there's still going to be some questions even after this game gets played.
The Titans were allowed to re-enter their facility yesterday for, I think it was only select staff members along with the players to get a walkthrough in a practice. I think they'll do the same thing I saw reported again today. So, that has also a big storyline in here. Like, how much, what kind of Titans team are we going to see show up on Tuesday? Because they just haven't gotten a chance to really run through things. I know they try to get a couple practices in that, they're being, investigated about right now after the COVID protocols were put into place and directives were handed down. They continued to meet, it appears, according to reports. We'll get the full details of that as this thing goes wrong. But this could be a situation, Ryan, where, with a few guys missing, and we'll talk about that in a minute, even with a full deck here, the Titans are definitely at a disadvantage going into this game.
Yeah, big disadvantage, because they haven't been practicing on a regular basis. And you just said it. There's going to be some guys who we're going to talk about here in an upcoming segment that probably aren't coming off of that COVID list by tomorrow night's game. And if that's the case, you're going to have some younger, maybe inexperienced players filling those roles. So that can lead to miscommunications on offense, where you run the wrong route, and that leads to maybe some sacks or turnovers or for Ryan Tannehill. And on defense, it could lead to blown assignments. So there's a lot that could factor into that could end up benefiting the Bills. But until the game takes place, we won't really know. The one thing I'll say is these guys are all NFL athletes, whether it's the people that are going to step up and fill in these roles or the players, the veterans that are going to be able to play. So I think overall it's going to be a relatively crisp and clean game, but there could be an opening for a few miscommunications to occur.
Let's get into some of these players that are not going to be there. And, I want to talk about the Titans and obviously some players that are remaining on the COVID list. But let's start with the Bills. And, one guy in particular that we know is not going to be in this game, and that's Matt Milano, linebacker, out still with the pec muscle. Sean McDermott said, after the injury, he was going to be week to week. So it's kind of a wait and see approach. We haven't seen him practice yet. And obviously that's concerning because you saw the drop off. Obviously, losing Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds for a game against the Dolphins earlier this year, that's never a good thing. You're two starting, really, rising star type linebackers. But Milano's impact in coverage, I think, is a little bit more impactful just because of all the things that they ask him to do. It's his, fourth year in this defense. The familiarity of his role and his job is there. And I think with him out of the lineup, we've seen, as good of a story as Tyrel Dodson has been, we've seen like AJ Klein, who just seems to be a complete drop off from Milano. And that's something that they're going to have to deal with on Sunday because they're going up against a team that has, a lot of good weapons. They'll be without some, but one in particular is tight end Jonnu Smith, who, he to me is the prototypical type tight end that, the Bills historically have had problems with.
Yeah, you saw in week 2 how Mike Gesicki had a huge game against Buffalo. And mind you said it, both linebackers were out, Milano and Edmonds. Edmonds will be there, so that will soften the blow a little bit. But Jonnu Smith is a threat in this passing game. And with some of these wide receivers that are going to be out, I think he may end up being the number one threat for this team. Even if A.J. Brown plays, he's coming off of an injury. He hasn't really had a lot of time to practice, so I'm not saying he would be a complete decoy by any means, but I don't think he's at 100% just yet. So Jonnu Smith is that guy who could end up being the 10-plus target weapon for this team in the passing game. So Tyrel Dodson is going to have a big responsibility to keep him in check. And if I'm the Bills, though, I'm going to try switching it up a little bit, too. It's not just all going to be Dodson. I might bring in a cornerback and put him on Jonnu Smith in certain situations, or a safety. Kind of go with what the Patriots did against Darren Waller in that Raiders game, where you change up the looks, you change up the coverage, you try to make those weapons uncomfortable, not knowing what's going to happen next. I think the Bills need to do something similar to try to limit his impact and really slow down this Titans offense.
Yeah, and another name that I think raises some eyebrows within Bills Mafia is Tre'Davious White, and the fact that he didn't practice all last week with a back injury. And that was something that popped up. He played the entire game last week against the Raiders. You mentioned it before we went on. His significant other tweeted out, people must be crazy if they think somebody's making up an injury. I know that some Bills fans have maybe pontificated about maybe some concerns about COVID and going to Tennessee, maybe why Tre'Davious White wasn't practicing last week. I never want to make that speculation until you actually talk to somebody about it. I got a few questions about it on social media, and it just makes me uncomfortable because, listen, until, Tre'Davious White tells you otherwise, he missed all this week of practice with a back injury. He's listed as questionable. That's a concern, but, I'm not going to go to the crazy conspiracy theories and start saying, because obviously your fans are linking back to Tre'Davious White's apprehension about opting into the season. He waited to the final minute. But, I think he mentioned it. I'm here now. I feel safe with what the Bills are doing. So I just think that's a slippery slope.
Oh, very much so. And, believe it or not, I do not have an NFL physique, but I have a history of back injuries, okay?
You're on your way. You're on your way, buddy.
I'm getting there. But back injuries can happen in all ways, shapes, and forms. I'm not even kidding. Last year, I pulled a muscle in my back walking down the stairs. That simple. It can happen to these pro players with spasms, with injuries, with little nicks and bruises. So the fact that he just popped up there with a back injury of all things, I said, yeah, that can happen any point in time. Whether you're a pro athlete, no matter how good of shape you're in, back injuries seem to be like one of the most common things where people can pull a muscle or have some aches and pains. So I understood that some fans, maybe it raised some eyebrows when he showed up on that injury list, but the team can't do that first and foremost, and I don't think they would do that. If he wasn't comfortable playing, I think they'll go out of their way to accommodate him. I really do. And that speaks volumes for Sean McDermott, Brendan Bean, and everyone else. But, like his significant other said, he's not going to be faking any kind of injury. If it says he has a back injury, he's had some kind of back injury. I think the encouraging thing is the fact that the Bills listed him as questionable for this game, despite not practicing all week.
All right, let's switch it over to the Titan side of things. We're going to talk more about Tre'Davious White and what his potential absence could mean for this Bills defense in the second portion of the show. But before we get to a break, let's talk about the COVID-19 list for the Titans. You posted a story on it yesterday. Run through who's still on that.
Yeah, off the top of my head, you still have Adam Humphries. You still have Corey Davis. Those are two of the big wide receiving weapons for this team. Jeffrey Simmons, a huge piece in the middle of that Titans defense. You have Christian Fulton, a young cornerback who you already have Adoree Jackson, who's on the IR for this team. So they're going to be down two of their top cornerbacks if he cannot come off of the injured reserve the reserve / COVID list, I should say, excuse me, by tomorrow's game. So those are the big hitters in that area. There is also Courier, the linebacker, as well, if I remember correctly. So some pretty significant names on both sides of the ball for the Titans.
There was a few people that replied yesterday. I had a tweet about Jeffrey Simmons, and that to me is the story about the guys that are on this COVID list. Trust me, I think they're going to miss Corey Davis and Andrew Humphries a ton. But I think that they, this offense, let's not get things twisted. This offense is predicated on getting the ball in Derrick Henry's hands and watching him work. And I think the Bills, one thing why I give them a good chance in this game is because they've shown historically an ability to limit the big time plays for Derrick Henry. But Jeffrey Simmons is a guy on the interior of that Titans defensive line that's just been outstanding. I mean, what a revelation. He fell in the draft. There were some character concerns, some off the field issues. The Bills take Ed Oliver at number 9. Quinnen Williams goes top 5 to the Jets. And Jeffrey Simmons early on here is looking like perhaps maybe the best of that bunch. And I know that we're still very early on. I think Ed Oliver is still on that nice ascending trajectory. But I just wanted to mention that with Jeffrey Simmons out of the mix, if he's not able to come back off the COVID list, that's going to open things up for the Bills running game. And I think that for a team in the Titans who are bottom 5 going into week 5 in sacks on the season, they only had 4 in 3 games. That's a nice thing for this Bills offense that's been humming. That they're not going to be able to generate the kind of pass rush that they would with Jeffrey Simmons in the lineup.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to compare him to Aaron Donald in terms of overall play and talent, but you saw what a guy like Aaron Donald can do in terms of creating that pressure up the middle and making life uncomfortable for Josh Allen. Simmons probably would not have that same effect on a play-by-play basis, but he's talented enough that he could cause some major disruption. So if he does not play on Tuesday, that is a huge benefit for the Bills going into that game. But, it's funny. You mentioned character concerns. Those types of players, it's really interesting to watch back and see. Sometimes the team benefits. So Simmons, right now, the Titans, have really benefited from him falling into their laps. Same instance, though, they were able to get Isaiah Wilson this year, offensive tackle who was just removed off of that COVID list. And he had a really rough offseason. He was put on the COVID list twice, but he had a DUI or DWI. I think he showed up a little bit out of shape, possibly. So, sometimes those character concerns are warranted, and there's a reason they fall to you. Other times, the players mature. It was a one-time thing, and then teams benefit like they have so far with Simmons. And Simmons is a great talent. So if he does not play, like you said, really opens things up in that run game for Devin Singletary, possibly Zach Moss if he's back. We didn't really see much of TJ Yeldon last week, but Yeldon kind of thrown into that mix too, depending on what happens going into tomorrow's game.
All right, we are going to be back in a moment. We are going to dive into some of these matchups that I think could have a really big impact on this game. And of course, as always, we'll have our predictions, guys. Stay tuned.
Ready for football? Tops is with ready-to-serve fan favorites everyone will cheer for. Delicious family or party packs like pizza, sliders, fried chicken, barbecue, or beef on weck. Starting at only $4 per serving. Perfect for game day and any day. Only at Tops.
All right, so this is a big week, Ryan. The Bills could go to 5-0 with a win over the Tennessee Titans. Do you know the year The last time the Bills started a season 5-0, what was the year?
You know, I'm going to guess, and I'm going to say like 92 or something like that, but I don't know.
Wow. That is impressive stuff, my friend. 1991.
Oh, pretty close.
So almost 30 years. And, you know, when you have a chance for that kind of history, I know this is a team over the last 2 decades before the McBean era that struggled quite a bit. But I feel like, you know, that's a big, you know, step or feather in your cap, if you will, to, you know, be able to start the way that they have. And I think what we've seen with what's played out over the course of the first month of the season is the Bills have had a pretty tough schedule to start things off. Obviously, getting to play the Jets out of the gate is a nice, comfortable way to start, but everybody after that has looked really legit. And obviously, we're coming off the heels of yesterday's big upset, the Las Vegas Raiders taking out the Kansas City Chiefs. The Bills win this week, and I think that there's a strong argument that can be made that we're sitting here talking about, you know, the best team in the AFC right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The one thing I'm going to point out is, thank goodness the Bills did not play against Henry Ruggs last week. Ruggs looked the part. He was shredding that defense, which is a positive sign, not looking too far ahead for Stephon Diggs and John Brown going into that game. If you can beat that defense deep the way that Ruggs did on a consistent basis, that bodes well for the Bills going into that game. But yeah, I think you have to look at them legitimately. I put a tweet out there yesterday saying, you know, Raiders defeated the Chiefs. The Dolphins just put the smack down on the 49ers, the Super Bowl 49ers from 1 year ago. How they fall. They're in last place currently in their division, which is pretty mind-boggling itself. You had the Rams comfortable 30-10 win, and I said, you know, the Jets, you know, they're still recognized as an NFL team, so that kind of counts too. But all things aside, those are pretty impressive wins for the Bills, where for a while it was, they haven't beaten anyone. Well, yeah, they really have. And if they beat the Titans, one of the NFL's lone undefeated teams, I'm sure you'll get the excuses again. And I think you'll hear the excuses either way, depending on the outcome of tomorrow based on this mess that was created. But you have to start really taking this team seriously based on what we've seen. I think the AFC is truly up for grabs. You know, it's not that far-fetched to think that the Chiefs could have 2 losses right now, because they really struggled in their first outing against the Chargers as well. So there's something to be said about this division, this conference especially, being up for grabs legitimately in 2020.
I can't tell you how many people over the course of the offseason, and even like in the Super Bowl, like lead up, I was talking about some of, you know, my quarterback takes on some radio shows and stuff. And I said, I mean, long term, I know the success that San Francisco has had. Give me Josh Allen over Jimmy Garoppolo. Listen, I like him a lot. I think he's a guy, a quarterback that you can win with. But I don't think that at any point he's shown anything in San Francisco that would point me in the direction of being an elite franchise quarterback. And I think, you know, what we saw yesterday, and it can happen, you know, in so many different ways, whether things aren't working from a play calling perspective, whether things aren't working from a personnel perspective. Maybe you're kind of, you know, entering new parts. You got some turnover on that offense from last year. I know George Kittle dealt with some injury stuff early on this season. How healthy is he? I'm not plugged in there, so I can't speak to that. But I think that, you know, what we've seen more than anything with the Josh Allen story and the Josh Allen experience is, you know, you never want to jump too far into the deep end of the water on any of these guys, because this is a year-to-year league, and there's so many cliches out there, but it's true. Things change on a daily basis. And, you know, Josh Allen is off to a great start with his Bills team. Let's see how this thing transpires and how it goes. The next one up is the Tennessee Titans. And I think this is a cool measuring stick game for Allen, because he's done well against the Titans in his career. He's 2-0, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in the 2 games. I think he's completing over 63% of his passes in those 2 games. So if you want to talk about splits, this is a team that he's had some success against, but nothing like we've seen in the first 4 games of this season. I mean, obviously this is a different offense. One of the first, you know, matchups we're going to talk about is Stephon Diggs versus Malcolm Butler. And it's a big one. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But I think for Josh Allen, this is a game where, you know, you go out there and you move the ball and you score more points against this Tennessee Titans defense and with this secondary. I think it tells a little bit more of a story.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. And, the one thing I'll say about these Bills-Titans games is they're usually kind of snooze fests. I hope that's not the case on Tuesday night when it's a national game and everyone's watching. But these games are always closely contested, 16-14, 14-13, low-scoring games. But like you said, that's not the same Bills offense that we've seen in 2018 and 2019. If you remember last year, it was Duke Williams providing that emotional or that spark for the offense and scoring that game-winning touchdown. Kudos to him for that touchdown, but there's Stephon Diggs now. There's John Brown. There's Cole Beasley. There's Gabriel Davis. The list goes on and on. So I'm expecting more of an offensive explosion or outburst from this Bills team, but just like we've seen from all their opponents, so I'm expecting more from the Titans as well. So hopefully an entertaining game. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes back and forth for a while. But there are definitely some matchups for the Bills to exploit, which you're about to mention right here.
Stephon Diggs versus Malcolm Butler has got to be one that Chad Hall, Brian Dable, Diggs, Sean McDermott, whoever you want to name, are just salivating over, because Malcolm Butler looked, he was exposed a bit 2 weeks ago. If you watch the Minnesota tape and, the Titans walked away with a 31-30 win, but, that matchup of Justin Jefferson, who ironically enough is the guy that the Minnesota Vikings took with the pick they acquired in the Stephon Diggs trade, that was his coming out party. 7 catches, 175 yards, a touchdown. Whoever they put on him, mostly Malcolm Butler, and obviously with the Dory Jackson out, I think the plan going in was that Dory Jackson was going to be the guy that took the number one receiver on the opposing team. So with him out of the picture, it puts a lot of pressure on Malcolm Butler, who's getting up there in age. Obviously, speed doesn't seem to be there against some of these quicker guys that can get separation. And to me, that is just a premium matchup for Stephon Diggs, who, if you can't keep up with him, he's usually going to make you pay.
Yeah, I, again, completely agree with what you're saying there. And even looking at Adoree Jackson being out, Christian Fulton possibly being out because of the COVID list, I wouldn't have been surprised if Vrabel pulled a Bill Belichick and tried to kind of change things up and put number 2 with safety help on Diggs and number 1 against John Brown, tried to slow him up a little bit that way, which we've seen in the past, some creative matchups, but they're shorthanded back there in that secondary at cornerback, especially. So I really do think that Diggs has a great opportunity, no matter who's lined up against him. But like you said, most likely Butler to have a great day, to continue to be towards the top, if not the top of the NFL's wide receiving list in terms of receiving yards at the end of this game, because he has been everything the Bills have wanted in a number 1 receiver. And again, another really good matchup here on Tuesday night. So don't be surprised if Stephon Diggs has a huge game for this Bills offense.
And let's not sleep on the secondary, because I think a lot of the success that this defense has had over the last couple of years is predicated on, how good this secondary has been. And obviously they, Logan Ryan's now with the Giants, but that safety duo of Kenny Vaccaro, Kevin Beard, it's as good as it comes out there. And, Bills fans are used to watching a pretty good safety tandem in Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. This is a group that can really make you pay. And one of the interesting stats that, I pulled out for this game is that in 3 games, the Titans have a +5 turnover margin. That means they're not turning the ball over when they have the ball, and they are getting the ball in their offense's hands when they're on defense. And that's huge. I mean, the Bills, while they've taken care of the ball for the most part, they're not forcing those kinds of turnovers. We saw when they finally did last week what it meant and how important it was to the game. When you're playing the elite of the elite, any mistake that you can kind of convert on, could change the complexion of the game. And those are 2 guys that Bills fans have to keep an eye on, because if they're able to pick a ball off, force a fumble, that could really, if this is a close game, that could change things real quick.
Yeah, big time. And same thing, we haven't really seen Josh Allen run as much as he did week 1, but you saw him fumble twice with different members of the Jets defense knocking that ball loose. I believe at least one was a member of the secondary that was able to jar it loose. So even if in terms of fumbles with running the ball, the Bills have to protect that football tomorrow, this Titans team is a lot like the Bills, where they don't turn the ball over much. They rely on their defense to create a turnover here and there to kind of help with the momentum, help with the settling of games. And then, obviously more so than the Bills, they rely on the run game with Derrick Henry. especially late in games to kind of wear out defenses. So it's going to be interesting. Whoever wins the turnover battle could end up, I think, realistically winning this game on Tuesday.
Another one, let's flip to the other side, and the same kind of thing. AJ Brown practice on Saturday. It's looking like he's trending in the right direction. He's been out for a few weeks, and that's huge news because without Corey Davis, without Adam Humphries, we're going to talk about another receiver here in a little bit, but AJ Brown's the guy that they're going to have to lean on, and depending on whether or not Tre'Davious White is able to play, questionable for this game, that's a matchup that could have a big impact. I mean, depending on who you listen to, and again, I always make sure to tell you, I'm not a film expert. I mean, I'm not going to – I try to watch all the games back. I try to watch the All-22 as much as I can. But I'm not going to really be able to tell you schematically, whose fault necessarily it is. A lot of times in a zone scheme, I think it's tough to determine whose fault it is. I think you could place blame on Josh Norman or Tre'Davious White for that touchdown that got called back in the Raiders game. But I think, if you ask Tre'Davious White right now, I would venture to guess that he – wouldn't say that he's playing at the level he played at last year, early on this year. So you need that version of Tre'Davious White against some of these top receivers. And AJ Brown is one of those guys that can pose a problem for the Bills.
Yeah, Brown is a young stud in this league at wide receiver. And maybe he's not a household name yet nationally, but I think he's well on his way. So having White, if he is available tomorrow, would be huge for this defense. If he's not there, then all of a sudden you're kind of wondering, well, that means Josh Norman is matched up on him. And then maybe it's Saran Neal that's getting bumped up opposite. And that would lead to some mismatches, in my opinion, for the Titans offense. So having White in there first and foremost is going to be big for this team if he does play. But they really have to focus in on Brown if he is playing, even if he's not 100%. He would be that main outside pass catcher for them. Whereas, on the inside, a certain tight end is going to be their main focus point, in my opinion. So 2 players that you got to try to take away in the pass game. And then obviously Derrick Henry in terms of stopping the run.
Yeah, let's talk about little Jonnu Smith here. And that's one of the comments here with Milano out. I think it's going to come down. I wrote it in the notes. I think it's going to come down to a team effort here. Tremaine Edmonds might get some time on him. Tyrell Dotson, who I think is probably going to see a little bit more time than AJ Klein. Unless, maybe AJ Klein had a good week of practice and they looked at film and they think that maybe he's going to take a step forward this week because he actually played really good against this team last year. He had 2 sacks, last year on the Saints. It's looked like he's a little bit slow this year. And obviously he's getting up in age. And, I think that that's one guy that you look at and, with Milano out that you want to see a little bit more from with the contract that they gave him. But, I think that this could be kind of a group effort here to kind of deal with Jonnu Smith, put a couple different guys on him, show him a couple different looks, try to make him uncomfortable.
Yeah. Again, so I think that Tyrell Dodson will get more snaps, like you said. Have not been impressed with AJ Klein in coverage this year, but like you said, week-to-week league, maybe had some better practices. I need to see more out of him before I'm saying I'm even comfortable with him lining up with Jonnu Smith. Secondary, maybe you bring up a safety, maybe you bring in an extra safety, maybe you bring in a cornerback and line it up. Change the looks up. Make it so that way Ryan Tannehill and Jonnu Smith don't know where the coverage is coming from or what kind of looks the Bills are going to give you. The more that you can disguise, the better off your defense is going to be in this matchup, in my opinion. And I know it's tougher to do in the NFL as it is today with few fans in the stands, offenses being able to adjust on the fly, right at the line, audible, and call out things they like. But I think the Bills need to try to disguise as much as they possibly can with this matchup, especially in terms of, who's going to be responsible, who can maybe bump him at the line, just the little things to throw him off on his routes.
Yeah, and I think for all guys in coverage, whether it be at that second level or, the 4 guys and the 5 guys in the secondary, it's going to be important for this defensive line to continue what they started to build, I thought, last week. I thought, Mario Addison looked pretty good, pretty engaged. I thought Quentin Jefferson kind of broke through a little bit, not just with the, play that he made, but I thought in the second half, across the line through their rotations, everybody seemed to be, playing off each other a little bit more. And that's so important in this scheme. I mean, Leslie Frazier spoken about that so many times. Like, it's not about the sacks. It's about pressuring the quarterback. It's about rushing his 4. And I think that we even saw a nice little spike with Daryl Johnson Jr. 6 snaps he had, and he had a game-changing play. Those are big moments where, kind of, maybe start to figure some things out, flip the momentum a little bit. There's a question in the comments here on AJ Epinesa. He had 15 snaps last week. I'll be interested to see if he gets those 15 snaps or if Daryl Johnson, based on his performance, maybe he can eat into those a little bit this week.
Yeah, I think that's fair to think that Johnson has a chance to kind of get a little bit more of a workload after that game-changing play he made last week for the Bills defense. I would like to see a little bit more consistency from this pass rush. I feel like there's too many times with the quarterback throughout the game sits back there and has time to scan the field and wait for one of his guys to get open, whereas I thought maybe going into this year, you'd see a little bit more of the quarterback feeling uncomfortable and having to get the ball out quicker than needed. But they did step up last week late in the game when needed. Some more consistency, though, would go a really long way in this game. And then obviously down the road here against the Chiefs next week on Monday night. So if the pass rush can take that next step, which you said, they're starting to play off each other a little bit more and mesh a little bit more, which could be the case of just finally having those 4 weeks together on the field and getting to know what each player does very well. I think there was going to be a little bit of a learning curve, but now I want to see that consistency on a week-to-week basis.
Before we get to, we're going to do this every preview episode where we do players to watch. I think that's a cool way to maybe, pick out one player to zero in on and how we think that player can impact the game or his play could impact the game. I think before we get there, I want to talk about this Tennessee offensive line, which is healthy. No names on the COVID list to my knowledge. And that's a strength of this team. And they're going up against this Bills defensive line. And they're going to try to open up some running lanes for Derrick Henry. So how important is it for not only this pass rush to get going, but for, this run defense to continue to do what it did, holding Josh Jacobs under 50 yards rushing last week on the heels of what happened against the Rams when Darrell Henderson really got a chance to get out in the open field a few times, did some damage on the ground. They got to keep things, gap integrity is, we always talk about it, but it's going to be really important this week against Derrick Henry.
Yeah, it's going to be huge because they're going to lean on Henry on early downs. Now, you'll get the occasional play action pass trying to open things up, but, he's the workhorse. So if you can stop him for a minimal gain on first down and make it second and long, third and long, then you're going to get in those 3-and-out situations, or maybe it's a 1 first down and out, and then you can flip the field early in this game. If you're not going to put up points here early, which I have no reason to believe the Bills can't put up points against this Titans defense, but field position is such an important factor in games as well. So that's something to monitor early on, and it's going to be really important for the Bills' defensive line to step up. They were great in against the Raiders. Josh Jacobs said, I wasn't surprised that I struggled because everything we saw on film showed the Bills filling in their gaps, and the gap integrity was there. So he was expecting it. He saw it. If the Bills can replicate that against the Titans, it's going to be huge, not only for the defensive performance in terms of keeping them fresh, getting them off the field, but it's going to be big for this offense in terms of maybe getting out to a big lead early in this game, or even just a 1-score or 2-score lead, and maybe start to pull away with it here a little bit and make the Titans more of a pass-first offense.
Yes, sir. Let's talk about our players to watch. I think one guy for me on the Titans side of things, wide receiver Khalif Raymond. Keep an eye on this guy. I went back and watched the Minnesota game yesterday before the 1 o'clock's kicked, and he was a downfield assassin against this Minnesota secondary. And he's somebody that if you don't make sure you take care of him, he can hurt you down the field. And we talked about Henry Ruggs and what he could have meant to this Raiders team last week. I think I don't want to put Raymond in the same conversation as Henry Ruggs. I mean, this is one of the bright young stars, speedster wide receivers in the NFL. But this is a guy that can get to the second level, the third level, even do some damage, get past your secondary, and they got to watch out for him. Who's your player to watch?
Tyrel Dodson. I think that when he is on the field, Ryan Tannehill is going to test him early in this game, see what he can do in coverage against a Jonnu Smith. See how he performs, with Derrick Henry getting the ball. How does he look in run defense? I think that with Matt Milano out, the Bills really need someone to step up in his place, and this is a huge opportunity for Dodson. Not that week 2 wasn't, but he'll have the benefit of having Tremaine Edmonds on the field next to him in this game, which will obviously, I think, even highlight his play to or maybe take his play to an even higher level, because I thought he really flashed at times in that Dolphins game. Well, he has an even bigger opportunity here to show that he's someone that could have a pretty sizable role in this defense, not only for the rest of 2020, but 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, in a weird way, like depending on what happens with Matt Milano and the salary cap situation, this could be an audition for him. And I also think that he's in a much better position now playing with Tremaine Edmonds as opposed to being asked to kind of be the quarterback of the defense. I know that he was the backup Mike, and that's probably where he's comfortable, but being able to kind of feed off of Tremaine Edmonds and what he brings now, seemingly pretty healthy coming into this game. I'll be interested to watch this. Prediction time. Ryan, drop your prediction here and give us your final thought before we get out of here.
I'm going to go Bills 27-24. They're always close games. I expect it to be another close game. I think it comes down to the fact that the Titans are going to be shorthanded on offense and on defense by the looks of things. And the fact that they just haven't had enough time to practice. So they make things interesting late, but the Bills pull off another close win to move to 5-0 for the first time since 1991.
Boom. I'm going to be right there with you. I'm picking the Bills to win this week. I actually, going into this thing, I was waffling a little bit because, you think that they're going to lose this season. And, this is a tough game against a team that went to the AFC title game last year. But for me, the more I look through this, the more I think that this is a mentally tough team. They say it themselves. They're road warriors. They did really well on the road last year. And I think this is a place they'll be comfortable in. That, we think back to last season when they made, Nissan Stadium almost like a de facto home game with the way that, Bills Mafia came out and the way that the Bills rallied around it. So I think this offense will keep it going. I think the Titans are missing too many important pieces. So I'm going to go Buffalo 34. Which I know it's crazy, but they're scoring points. And check it out. Tennessee has given up a lot of yards, over 400 yards a game this season. And I think the Titans will score 21, and the Bills win by 10 points on the road, 31-21. There you have it. Give us your final thoughts, Ryan. What else are you thinking on this fine? We don't usually do these Monday afternoon podcasts, but we're a little bit this is a weird week. It's a different time.
Yeah, just kind of thank goodness that this game, first of all, is going to get in after all the ups and downs. But hopefully this is going to be the last time that they're kind of clustered in with all these teams dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic. For the most part, the league has done a pretty good job. It's been a player here or there. So I get the fans that are concerned going into this game. But the fact that the Titans have had no positive tests in the last 2 days bodes well. Not only for the game getting played, but for the Bills themselves in terms of their overall health and safety, which is the most important thing. So like I said, hope that this is the last time that there's this kind of interruption or this kind of worry heading into a game, which obviously, bizarrely enough, will be played on a Tuesday night.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Head over to the audio platforms. If you missed any part of the show, we're going to have this uploaded on Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, Podbean, wherever you get your podcast. This will be available in the next hour, our big preview show, and we will be back. Be back, double B's. We'll be back right after the game, maybe a little bit after the game, maybe a half hour or so. Titans, Buffalo Bills tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Make sure you check out the podcast. Don't go to sleep right after the game's over because we are going to be live to talk about it all. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review on all those platforms, and head over to Tops. Go get yourself some grub for this game. If I was going to be home, I'd be grilling. That's one of the cool things about not traveling this year on Sundays. I've been ordering pizza. Ryan mentioned it last week, the great breakfast pizza from Tops. You have breakfast pizza at night, and I'm pretty sure they have regular pizza there too. So shout out to our sponsor, Tops, and we will be back on Tuesday night. Have a great Monday, everybody. Enjoy the games.
Ready for football? With every game a home game, Tops is ready for you with its TV a Day giveaway. For 6 weeks, every day you shop is a new chance to win a massive 70-inch 4K TV. Shop Tops for the best deals in town, in-store, or online to win.